We're supposed to start with Act 4. I want to back up for just, hopefully not more than about 10 minutes, to Act 3, Scene 4, pages 1664. Page 1664. Hamlet's speech at the bottom of that page that begins with, "Oh, throw away the worser part of it." Gertrude said, "Hamlet, you cleft my heart in twain." I alluded the other day to Psalm 50, creating me a clean heart, where David says, "Create me a clean heart, O God." And later on he says, "A broken and contrite heart is what God accepts," etc. And Hamlet says, "Throw away the worst part, keep the good part, clean it," etc. And he talks to her about assuming a virtue, like putting on a virtue, like it's clothing. Play acting, pretending that you're virtuous. Okay, we've already talked about play acting as essentially a theme in the play. And he goes on and says, if you pretend to be virtuous, then, the first night, then the next night it'll be a little bit easier, and the next night it'll be a little bit easier, and after a while, through the force of habit, you'll become virtuous, okay? And he says there, towards the middle of that speech, line 168 and following. Now let me back up. 166. "So refrain tonight, and that shall lend a kind of easiness to the next abstinence. The next more easy for use," this is line 169, "for use almost can change the stamp of nature. And then there's a problem in the text. And this text is based primarily upon the first folio, but there's a problem in most of the text right here. A word is missing. And we know the word's missing, apparently. I've not read all the textual scholarship on Hamlet, so I'm not 100% sure about this. Because there's a gap, okay, in the line. So, and then your gloss tells you, for line 170, editors usually amend that whatever's missing by inserting master, okay? And either master the devil or throw him out with wondrous potency, okay? So, what can master the devil or throw him out with wondrous potency? Use almost can change the stamp of nature. By use there, he's talking about the positive, virtuous behaviors, okay? So here's where we need to back up for a moment. Because I don't think I talked about this much the other day. The stamp of nature. What Hamlet's talking about there is the idea of original sin, okay? Which we have talked about, which comes ultimately, the terminology comes ultimately from St. Augustine of Hippo, who argued that because of Adam and Eve's deeds in the garden, the sin that they brought into the world is passed on genetically to every individual, which is why in the medieval Catholic Church, it was necessary when a child was born to baptize that child very, very quickly, because it was a doctrine of the church. If a 4-year-old baby who's not been baptized dies, that baby goes straight to hell. Baby does not go to purgatory. Hell, okay? That child will never leave hell. Now, hell had kind of varying dimensions. You had bad parts of hell and you had not as bad parts of hell, all right? Just go with it. So, what Hamlet is suggesting is that use, virtuous habit, or good works can almost, notice he says, stamp out this. Not totally. Almost. Okay? Why? Because if he said it could, then that would put Hamlet firmly on one side of a huge theological debate. It would put him on the Catholic side. Okay? Shakespeare, as an author writing in Elizabethan England, could not do that safely. I mean, that's maybe not quite cause for a capital crime, but it would be cause for getting in a lot of trouble. Okay? So Shakespeare kind of hedges his bets there. All right? So why? What's so wrong with good works? Well, the Protestant church which began with this, and I'll talk about this for a moment, but the Protestant movement in the 16th and 17th, early 17th centuries had kind of these three mottos or slogans where it kind of reduced all belief to these, today we would call them sound bites, okay? Sola Scriptura, sola gratia, sola fides. Sola Scriptura, the Bible alone, or Scripture alone. Sola gratia, grace alone. Sola fides, faith alone. That is, that's all you need. Those three things to be saved. Period. If you have a Bible and you can read it, okay, that will enable you to read it, and you will receive, based upon the reading of it, the grace of God. And because God gives you grace, you will then have faith. Period. That's all you need. You don't need anything else. Okay? You don't need, for example, a priest. You don't literally even need a quote-unquote church that is a local body of believers. Why? Because everybody's part, all quote-unquote Christians, all who believe in this, are part of the universal church. All right? So how did this come about? Largely it came about because of this. Martin Luther, who was an Augustinian monk, Augustinian just means the particular order he was in, like there were Franciscan monks and Dominican monks and Benedictine monks. Well, there were Augustinian monks. The Augustinian monks were among the most severe, okay, strict, stern. In Luther, on October 31st, 1517, Halloween. Why is it called Halloween? It's All Hallows Eve. The next day is All Hallows Day or All Saints Day. By the way, it's the day Harry Potter's parents are murdered. There's a reason for that, by the way. From the first book to the seventh book, it's brought out. Okay? October 31st, 1517, Martin Luther nails 95 theses. Literally, sheets of paper with 95 discussion points. Argumentative theses to the church door in Wittenberg, Germany. Where have we heard Wittenberg? In the course of Hamlet. It's where Hamlet went to university. It's where Rosencrantz and Guildenstern went to university. It's where Horatio. Okay, there's a reason Shakespeare puts this in puts Wittenberg in Hamlet. He's wanting us to think about Protestantism, Protestant belief. I think I've said it, if not in this class, I said it in my Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. This is the most thoroughly religious of, I think at least, of all of Shakespeare's plays. Or, I can't say it's the most overtly. It involves the most religious debate, okay, of all of Shakespeare's plays. Okay? So, what are these theses? There are 95 points for discussion. It's almost like he wrote this all down, nailed it to the church door, and said, somebody come meet me at the pub, let's have a few beers, and let's talk. And by the somebody, he means church hierarchy, bishops, cardinals, etc. Let's talk about these. Why? Because these are 95 points that Luther says are problems in the church. These are things that need to get cleaned up. Here's an example of one. Indulgences. Okay? What's an indulgence? It's a piece of paper that has the Pope's seal on it. Okay? So the Pope essentially issues them. That an indulgence seller can go into a specified area. Think of that simply as a county. So Rutherford County would have an indulgence seller, one person who is licensed to sell indulgences in Rutherford County. There'd be somebody else possibly licensed to sell them in Davidson County, somebody else in Williamson. Or sometimes an indulgence seller would be authorized multiple counties. Okay, so Somebody who sells this slip of paper. What's the piece of paper? The piece of paper is essentially the get out of jail card for purgatory. Or time reduced in purgatory. So you could buy indulgences that would get a dead family member time out of purgatory. It wouldn't get them all time out. Why? Because unless you're Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett or somebody like that, you're probably not wealthy enough. Because most people, when they go to purgatory, they don't have 20 years. It's like multiple what we would consider lifetimes. Okay? Takes a long time to purge those sins. But, so you could buy an indulgence and, you could get maybe your father's, pick a sin, excused, taken care of. And the idea of behind the indulgences, where do I have it? Over here, is that when Christ lived and died on earth, he put into his bank account of good deeds an unending amount of good deeds. That is, in this quote-unquote bank account, no matter how much you take out of it, it's always full. So, this idea developed, well, we can subtract from that bank account an amount and apply it to somebody. Okay? Notice the bank account stays full. So the idea of indulgences is based upon the good works, the merit of Christ, right? There's a guy, an indulgence seller named Johannes Tetzel. He's German Catholic. And he would go into towns in Germany and he would say, when a coin in the copper clinks, so he'd like have a metal plate, and he'd say, I'm selling indulgences, drop your coins in, when it clinks, a soul from purgatory springs. It rhymes in German. And think about that. Pay me, buy this indulgence, buy these indulgences, and you could get a dead family member out of purgatory. Because maybe they've already served, quote unquote, most of their time. All right? Now, so that's the basic general idea. Here's the problem. Here's the thing that really bothered Luther. You could also buy indulgences for sins for yourself that you've not yet committed. So you could find your local indulgence seller and say, Father, I need to buy an indulgence. Well, what kind do you need there? It's like buying a car. What model do you need? What year do you, it's one for rape. Why? The indulgence seller wouldn't ask why. He'd just say, okay, and how much do you want to spend? Like, how bad is this rape going to be? Or is it going to be one rape or multiple rapes? I mean, I'm not kidding. It's totally screwed, okay? But you could buy an indulgence for a sin you've not committed. Then you could go commit that sin, and as long as you keep that indulgence, the idea is, you go, you die, and you can metaphorically show it to, I don't know who the keeper of purgatory is, but show it to whoever the keeper of purgatory is and go, you can't keep me for this one. Okay? Why? I apply Jesus on this one. Right? Luther was thoroughly repelled by that. For both theological reasons, which I think are pretty obvious, and financial reasons. The money for the sale of indulgences didn't stay in Germany. It's almost like, if Johannes Tetzel walked around with a MGGA hat, Make Germany Great Again hat, okay, and the money stayed in Germany, Luther wouldn't have had quite as bad a problem. But the money all went to Rome to help build St. Peter's Basilica. Right? So that was just one, for an example, of the 95 Theses. Another one was, Why do clergy have to be celibate? Because there's nothing in the New Testament about clergy being celibate. That entered the Roman Catholic Church around the year 1000 AD. Okay? So, there's a bunch of these. He wants to argue, wants to debate. Nobody takes him up. So he starts writing these tracts. Blog posts, think of them as. Okay? And they get printed because the printing press was invented about 70 years prior. They get printed and they start getting distributed, copied off. Okay? People start asking questions. Because one of the things, why do we need a priest? I mean, the book of Hebrews says there's one mediator between God and man, Jesus Christ. And yet we have all these priests who are saying, no, you got to come to me, you got to say confession, you got to da-da-da-da-da. Okay? Luther's like, let's talk about this. Okay? So, 4 years later, it's not the Pope, not sure who it would be, Archbishop, no, Holy Roman Emperor. Holy Roman Emperor invites Luther to what is called the Diet of Worms. Diet just means a meeting, an assembly. Worms is the name of the town, right? And he thinks, he's led to believe, he's going to have his conversation. They're going to have a debate about these. But instead, Luther gets there, and all of his books, and all of his pamphlets, and everything he's written are stacked on a desk, table. And he's asked one question. Do you recant? Do you take it all back? And notice the way the question is phrased. It's not really a question. It's a command. It's take it back. Say, oops, I was wrong. This is all in error. And Luther said, according to pretty much all of his biographers, give me 24 hours to pray about it, and I'll come back and I'll tell you. So he goes off, he prays for 24 hours, he comes back to the next morning, and he says, unless I can be shown by reason, by scripture, or by my conscience, here I stand, I can do no other. That is, I stand on every word I've written. I'm right, you're wrong. Okay. Now, one caveat that Luther made, the Holy Roman Emperor agreed to, is I'm not going to show up at your diet unless I'm granted safe passage. That is, you allow me to come unmolested, and you allow me to leave unmolested. I'm not going to come and get sent off to some camp somewhere. And they agree. Luther leaves and he's kidnapped, but he's kidnapped by friends who put him up in a castle, I'm pretty sure in Wittenberg. Might be wrong about that. And he starts translating the Bible. And he's the first person, really, to translate the Bible into what's called a vernacular language. The everyday, ordinary language spoken by the people. Why? Because Luther said, if somebody has the Bible in their own language, they don't need a priest. They don't need a church. They don't need somebody else to interpret it. Okay? So, all of that is kind of background to that little. For use can almost change the stamp of nature. Use, virtuous behavior, can almost change the stamp of nature, original sin. What's that mean? Good works. Good works can almost blot that all out. He doesn't say it can. Why? Because if he does, then he becomes fully on the Protestant side. On the Catholic side. Because most Protestants at this time, a lot of Protestants today wouldn't say this. Most Protestants at this time said, there's nothing good you can do. Why? Because of Calvinism. Okay? So let me talk about Calvin for just a moment. John Calvin is what he usually goes by, or called today, is the father of what's called Calvinism. Calvin was a Swiss theologian, heavily read in the church fathers, etc., etc. Okay? And he kind of took Luther's ideas. He's a little bit later than Luther. Took Luther's ideas and really ran with them. That is, he went a lot farther than Luther did. Luther believed in the quote-unquote saints. He didn't say you should pray to them, however. Well, Calvin didn't even believe that there were individual saints, so to speak. Okay? So, Calvin comes up with what's called a systematic theology that he publishes in two volumes, called The Institutes of the Christian Religion, where he starts at the very beginning and goes to the end of Christianity and argues for these are the doctrines and dogmas of the Christian church. Okay? Well, that's been simplified. And bear in mind, every time you simplify something, you're obviously leaving a whole lot out. Okay? This is often called, this acronym, TULIP, often called an oversimplification of Calvin's beliefs, right? Which is true to an extent. But it works as a rubric kind of understanding for Calvinism. So what can you boil down Calvin's ideas ultimately to? These 5 main points. Okay? Total depravity of humanity. What's that mean? Well, every one of these kind of exists on a spectrum. Okay? For the real harsh, hardcore Calvinists, I used to be one of these. I used to be pretty hardcore Calvinist. Okay? That means everything you do is touched by sin. No matter how good of a work it is. You help a little old lady across the street in rush hour traffic. How is that touched by sin? Because it makes you feel good. And because it makes you feel good, it's stroking your ego. That's pride. There it goes. So according to Calvin, because of that element of sin, what does that do? It does exactly what Hamlet, the play, talks about. Okay? With taint, sully. If you have something perfectly pure in terms of one color, yellow, white, whatever, and you add even a drop of another color, what's it do to the perfect purity of the original color? It shatters it. It's no longer pure. If it's not pure, it's dirty. It's like, you can't be 99% a virgin. You either are, or you can't be, mostly pregnant. No, you are or you aren't. Okay? So, total depravity in what this is often taken to mean, okay, is that everything we do is bad. Right? That's a kind of a popular conception of this idea. Right? So that's the first one. And this is because of that. Because of original sin. Okay? So, the next thing, unconditional election. What's the unconditional election? God chooses. Saved, damned, saved, damned. Notice, did any of you do anything, the 3 of you who were saved, to be saved? Nope. It's unconditional. That is, you can't earn it. No matter what you do in your life, you cannot earn election. God chooses, and that's it. Notice when I did that, I did saved, damned, saved, damned. Out of approximately 15 people, 3 were saved. Okay? Because in Calvinistic thought, the vast majority of humanity will go to hell. Vast majority. Few are called. Many are chosen. Few are called. Or is it many are called, few are chosen? Can't remember. One of those two. Okay? So unconditional election. Limited atonement. What's atonement mean? That's who Christ died for. It's limited. Notwithstanding the multiple passages in the New Testament that says Christ died for all, Calvin said it's not what it really meant. He only died for those who were elected. So if you're one of the three in here who elected, guess what? Part of the reason you were elected is because Christ died for you. He didn't die for everybody. Okay? Irresistible grace. Those who are elected, those for whom Christ died, they will receive irresistible grace. Notice, what does that adjective irresistible mean? It cannot be resisted. So if Alan tries to resist, no. God's going to win. In other words, you're kind of saved. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, whether or not you like it or not. I'm being facetious. Because in the Calvinistic tradition, if you do receive this, then you obviously you want it also. Okay? And it's shown in your behavior. Okay? Lastly, perseverance of the saints. If you were born with total depravity, but God did elect you, and Christ did die for you, and God did shower his irresistible grace upon you, then you will persevere to the end. That is, no matter what happens in your life, you will never say, F Jesus, or F you, God. You will, on your dying deathbed, with your last breath, say, praise the Lord. Okay? That's perseverance. That's no matter what happens. So somebody who is quote unquote, think of a famous figure. Somebody who's quote unquote a great Christian, leader, etc. And you hear on his or her deathbed, she says, I was wrong my whole life. Christianity's nothing but a bunch of hooey. It's a, how did Marx put it? Opiate for the masses. Jesus is a liar. What a good Calvinist would say is, fail that test. Because that person did not show perseverance, guess what? That person did not have irresistible grace. God did not die for that individual. That person was not elected. That person died in her total depravity. It's a very nice system in one sense. Why? Because it's very circular. If there's a problem, you can always circular your way around it. You can always find a little key to make it all work. Okay? Why is all of that important? Because it gets back to this stuff. Because of what Calvin teaches, Calvin says there's nothing you can do. Nothing. And because of that, a lot of really staunch Protestants in Shakespeare's day then said, therefore, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how you treat the poor, how you treat the disadvantaged, how you treat, etc., etc. Martin Luther, as I said, translated the Bible into German. He did not want to include the book of James in the New Testament. Why? Because James is all about. And that James, by the way, that's James, the quote-unquote brother of the Lord. So he's pretty tight with Jesus, What's James all about?
Faith without works is dead.
Faith without works is dead. In other words, you can't have just faith. If you don't show it, it's not real faith. Well, how do you show it? Parable of the Last Judgment, Matthew 25. The parable of the sheep and the goats. If you feed the poor, give water to the thirsty, clothe the naked, visit the sick, visit those in prison, help orphans, etc., inasmuch as you've done it unto the least of these, you've done that's all works. Look at the very end of the book of Revelation. And he opened the books, and what was there? What was written according to what they did, not what they believed. Okay? So, all this is embedded within the play. So Hamlet, then repents, having killed Polonius, and we pick up with Act 4, where we left off. So the queen goes and tells the king what happened. And the king says, it had been so with us, had we been there. In other words, he'd have killed me if I'd been the one behind the curtain. Yeah, pretty much. So, go to scene 2. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern come in. They ask Hamlet where the body is and such. Hamlet doesn't really tell them. He does say, top of page 1668, line 23 or so, the body is with the king, but the king is not with the body. The king is the thing. You got a gloss at the bottom of your page. Possibly the body lies in death with the king, my father, but my father walks disembodied, that is, ghost. Or Claudius has the bodily possession of kingship, but kingliness, as justice of inheritance, is not with him. And what Shakespeare is possibly playing out there is the idea of what's called the king's two bodies. This was a political idea. The king has two bodies. He has his personal physical body, and what else? The body of state, his political body. Queen Elizabeth referred to herself as England. That is, she referred to herself as monarch, Queen of England, and she referred to herself as England itself. So therefore, what applies to her applies to the whole country. Just the other day, somebody made a comment about President Trump and said, he thinks he is the United States. And I was like, whoa, we're back in Elizabethan times. I mean, whoever said that, I don't remember who it was or even what it was about. But they were dealing with the same idea. Only back in Shakespeare's day, this was common political orthodoxy. That is, all kings, all monarchs thought of themselves as the state. It's part of why you don't kill the king. You kill the king, you kill the state. I mean, you set the state in disorder, which is why Hamlet says, time is out of joint. Oh, alas, that I was born to make it right. Time's out of joint. The state's out of joint. One of the famous quotes from the play, there's a ton of them, right? I mean, this is the most quoted play of Shakespeare's, okay? Is we hear the phrase, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Well, what's the thing rotten? The state of Denmark is rotten. Why? Because the rightful king is dead. And the person who's acting as king isn't the rightful king. Okay? So, king comes in, scene 3. Hamlet comes in, and the king says, Hamlet, where's Polonius? Notice, he just cuts to the chase. Come on, where's the body? At supper. At supper, where? Not where he eats, but where is eaten. That is, where he is eaten. A certain convocation of politic worms are e'en at him. And your gloss tells you, this is an allusion to the diet of worms. Okay? That is, it's an allusion to what Luther thought was going to be this big discussion about all these theological ideas. Well, there's all kinds of theological ideas embedded in here. So, what does Hamlet do? He says he's at a certain convocation of politic worms are e'en at him. That is, remember he said, he's not eating, he's being eaten. Remember the speech where he talks with Polonius? Tells Polonius, when Polonius says, do you know me? He says, yeah, you're a fishmonger. And then he goes on and talks about the sun and carrion and breeding and maggots. Well, Act 5, he's going to talk about worms and maggots essentially too. That is, this idea of our bodies feeding maggots. It's at the beginning of the play, it's in the middle of the play, and it's at the end of the play. It's telling us something about what Hamlet thinks about human life. So, Your worm is your only emperor for diet. Is it diet or diet? If it's diet, then he means this kind of thing. So, if the emperor calls this Holy Roman Emperor, he's essentially saying he's no more than a worm. Right? If it's the other kind of thing, the stuff you eat diet, then look at it. Your worm is your only emperor for diet. Colon. What comes after the colon is an explanation of what he means. We fat all creatures, else to fat us. Now, he knows nothing about vegans. Really, he knows nothing about vegetarians. There weren't any vegetarians, or very, very few in Shakespeare's day. He's assuming, what do? We fatten the pigs, we fatten the lambs, we fatten the sheep, we fatten the goats, we fatten the cows. Why? Because we like big, fat, juicy chunks of meat. We fat all creatures to fat us, and we fat ourselves for maggots. I don't know about you, but when I'm eating dinner, I don't think about maggots. I don't think about, and I'm going to die. I'm going to be food for something else. But that Hamlet just cuts to the end there, right? Your fat king and your lean beggar is but variable service. Think of Thanksgiving dinner. Or think of, you go out, there's a party somewhere, and there's multiple kinds of dishes served. Usually there's one big thing, and then there might be other littler stuff, like a big roast or a big turkey or something, and then there might be, cuts of ham or something else. Well, he's saying the king, that's the big roast. The beggar, it's the little sliced pieces of ham, prosciutto or something. To what end? Same thing. Okay? Your fat king, your lean beggar is but variable service. 2 dishes, but to 1 table. What's the table? Death. Death. What did his mother and Claudius say to him in the opening scene where we saw Hamlet interacting with them? What were their speeches all about? Death is common to us all. And Hamlet says, yes, it is common. Then why seems it so particular with thee? She asked him. And he's like, seems? Okay. So it's almost like we get to this point and Hamlet's like, you're right. Death is common to all. And yet you, Claudius, somehow think you're above everybody else. But you know what? If we're all going to end up the same, there's really no difference between your lean beggar and your fat king. 2 dishes to 1 table. Colon. That's the end. What's the end? Death. What's the purpose of life, according to Hamlet? To die. Perchance to sleep? Maybe, according to the to be or not to be speech. King, alas, alas. Why does the king say alas, alas? Could be, Hamlet is flipping out of his mind. Well, what else? You're a king. Put yourself in Claudius' shoes. You are the all-powerful ruler here on your little plot of ground. And what is this kid just compared you to? A homeless guy on the side of the road. Feed me, I'm hungry. You're the king. That would be a reason to say, alas, how dare you? Hamlet. A man may fish, notice he's not done. A man may fish with the worm that hath eat of a king. Okay? So you go fishing, you dig up a worm, and let's say you're fishing is near a cemetery. Where you're fishing is near a cemetery. Cemetery, riverbank, And you go, and because you know the cemetery is going to have rich soil, because all the organic matter buried in it, you dig up a worm. And the worm happened to have done what? Well, it went through the soil where a body was, and it ate part of the body. A man may fish with the worm that hath eat of a king, and eat of the fish that hath fed of that worm. Which means you, therefore, metaphorically at least, you take into yourself, you eat the king. What do you mean? Claudius asks. Nothing but to show you how a king may go a progress through the guts of a beggar. And your gloss tells you progress. It means a royal journey. A royal progress in Shakespeare's day is when the king or queen would take a tour and visit several cities and usually pronounce royal justice. That is, he or she would sit on a throne in the cities and people would be brought before and they'd go, you win, you lose, next, kind of a thing. Okay? They'd hear various cases and then they'd come back home. That's not what Hamlet means. Hamlet means kind of taking a royal tour through what? The intestinal tract of a beggar. Why? Because the beggar is the one who's going to go digging in the cemetery for a worm. But what's he really mean? Well, what happens when you eat something? Ultimately, some of it comes out the other end, right? That's what he's saying about Claudius. He's saying, Claudius, you're nothing more, pardon my language, but a piece of shit. He's saying, you will be /are dung. And that idea is going to get brought up then in Act 5. Notice, I think Claudius understands exactly Hamlet's point. When he doesn't ask for clarification, he just says, where's Polonius? By this point, he's getting fed up. He wants to get him on the boat. Get him over to England. Why? Get the head cut off. In heaven. Well, that's generous on Hamlet's part. Polonius was sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Hamlet killed him. Where is he? He's in heaven. Send thither to see. Send. Ask one of your followers to die and go to heaven and see if Polonius is there. If your messenger find him not there, seek him in the other place yourself. What other place? You're grinning. No. Hell. I thought there were 2 other places. Where's the ghost insinuate that he's from? Purgatory. Hamlet here falls clearly on the Protestant side by implying there's only heaven or hell. So, send somebody else up there to find him, and if he's not there, go to hell yourself. But if indeed you find him not within this month, that is, if you don't go to hell yourself within this month, or possibly heaven, it's kind of warning Claudius, your days are numbered. You'll find him up by the stairs. Okay? So, King reminds Hamlet, you know you got to go off to England. England! Yay! Travel. Hamlet knows exactly what's going to happen, right? He told his mother just at the end of Act 3. She said, Hamlet says, remember I'm going to England. She goes, oh, I'd forgotten. He goes, not me. And my 2 friends are guiding me, and I will trust them as adders feigned. And he talks about, tis the sport to hoist the engineer with his own petard. Engineer there means demolitions expert. Engineers were the guys who designed demolitions to blow open castle walls and such. He's telling us Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are going to die because of their actions. Okay? So, Everybody leaves but the king, and the king tells us Hamlet's going to die. Okay? So now we hear it straight from the king. So we get scene 4. Scene 4, a plain in Denmark. Doesn't matter where, just anywhere, but it's in Denmark, and it's a plain. It's not a forest, it's not mountains, etc. Hamlet is on his way to the coast, right? With Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They're leading him to the coast where they will take a ship, sail to England. And who do we see? We see Fortinbras, a captain, and his army. Now, who's Fortinbras? Or Fortinbras, if you want. King of Norway. What's he doing in Denmark? Is this an invasion? No, it's not. How do we know? Because he makes it clear that Claudius knows it's not invasion. He sees a messenger and he says, go tell the Danish king we're just passing through. Why? Because he's coming from Norway, from your perspective, from Norway up here through Denmark to Poland over here. He's going to wage war against Poland. Not against all of Poland. Hamlet's going to tell us a little teeny tiny piece of land. Okay? So Hamlet and the captain talk. Hamlet asks, how much? And the captain says, line 18 or so, we go to gain a little patch of ground that hath in it no profit but the name. To pay 5 ducats 5, I would not farm it. Nor will it yield to Norway or the Pole a rank or rate should it be sold in fee. Okay? So Hamlet says, well, the Pole will never defend it. That is, if it's worthless territory, the Poles won't defend it. He says, yes, it's already garrisoned. 2,000 souls in 20,000 ducats, Hamlet says, will not debate the question of this straw. Okay? This straw, settle this trifling matter. But what is the debate really about? And it's not a trifling matter. The land itself is a trifle. What's it about? Honor. It's about honor. Okay? So, everybody else leaves and Hamlet's left on the stage. And Hamlet says, how all occasions do inform against me. All occasions. Every instance, every circumstance. He says, tells me, Hamlet, you're a damn fool. Why haven't you gotten revenge yet? He says, it's like I keep running into these mirrors that say, time's ticking. You haven't yet done it. What is man if his chief good and market of his time, few years after Shakespeare writes Hamlet, Protestants in England, Presbyterians, followers of Calvinism, write what's called the Westminster Confession of Faith, which is a catechism. This is what you need to believe in order to be a good Christian. And it begins with what is the chief end and good of man? Okay? What is our purpose? So, Hamlet says, what is a man if his chief good and market, that is use of his time, be but to sleep and feed? What good are we if all we do is eat and sleep? A beast, that's all beasts do. Right? So he goes on and says, let me skip a bunch. Line 53. Rightly to be great is not to stir without great argument. What did Polonius tell Laertes before he went back off to Paris? Enter not into quarrels, but if you do, do it such that your opponent knows not to do it again. Rightly to be great is not to stir without great argument. Don't act unless you have a really good reason, Hamlet says. But greatly to find quarrel in a straw when honor's at the stake. So, rightly to be great is to find quarrel in a straw. What do you mean by straw? He doesn't mean the kind of straw we sip out of. He means a piece of hay, which is inconsequential, totally worthless, unless what? Your honor is at stake. Why does Hamlet say this? His honor is at stake. Why? How many of you have seen The Princess Bride? Really? Man, uneducated. Sorry. Just culturally unaware. You need to watch Princess Bride. It's one of the greatest satires, okay, ever done. Watch it, don't read it. The book is horrible. I mean, is it depressing. You want to drink poison after reading it. But there's a great scene in it multiple times. Mandy Patinkin plays character ENGL Montoya, who is out for revenge. He wants to kill the six-fingered man who killed his father. And every time he meets up to him, he says, "You killed my father, prepare to die." Okay? What's the honor? A father slain, a mother stained. That's not a straw. Those are important things. So he goes on. How stand I then that have a father killed, a mother stained, excitements of my reason that it's rational, and my blood, and yet all sleep? He sleeps while what? I see the imminent death of 20,000 men. For what? He says for a plot of land that isn't large enough to even bury them in. And yet, for the king of Norway, honor is at stake. So he's willing to sacrifice. Notice, he's willing to sacrifice 20,000 men. He's not willing to sacrifice himself, per se. Okay? So, scene 5. And Horatio comes in, he says, you might want to take a look at Ophelia. She's not doing so well. And Ophelia comes in, and she's kind of looking a little distracted, talking to the air, and then she starts singing these songs about flowers and such. Okay? And the king asks, line 66, how long has she been thus? And Ophelia goes on, I hope all will be well. We must be patient. We must be patient means we must endure. We must suffer it through. It's what patience means. Okay? I cannot choose but weep, etc., etc. What's she talking about? But to think they would lay him in the cold ground. Who's the him? Her father, Polonius. Okay? King says, this is caused by Polonius' death. Is Ophelia's madness caused all by Polonius' death? No, and you kind of shook your head no. Why?
Hamlet.
Oh, to have seen what I have seen, to see what I see. After Hamlet's speech with her, I think that's when she starts kind of losing it. Because what else happens there? Hamlet says what? I did love you once. And then he says, I didn't love you. You were deceived. Okay? He tells her, even while he says, believe none of us, he tells her, I never loved you. I think that kind of sets her a little unbalanced. And then she finds out Hamlet killed her father. The balance is completely gone. Okay? So then a messenger comes in, top of page 1674, about line 95. And the messenger brings word that Laertes has returned from Paris, and the people outside the castle are chanting, Laertes, Laertes, Laertes is king, King Laertes. Okay? King says the doors are broke, that is, they've smashed through the castle doors. Laertes comes in and says, where's this king? Everybody else move aside. And the king's like, are you going to kill me? So he calms down Laertes. Why is Laertes back? word has reached him that Hamlet killed Polonius. Okay? So, Ophelia comes in. Okay? After the king kind of calms him down and says, I'll tell you everything, just chill. Ophelia comes in. La, 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 just kind of space cadet-y. She doesn't even recognize Laertes. And she goes back out. And Laertes says, 194, do you see this, O God? I mean, this would even make God weep. And the king says, I must commune with your grief or you deny me right. I must share with your grief. Why? Well, Polonius was my right-hand man. I needed him. I trusted him, etc. Okay? So, he said, hold on. Just wait. Listen to what I have to say to you, and I'll give your desire for revenge, as he puts it, due content. Top of page 1677. Okay? Scene 6. Another room in the castle. A gentleman comes in, sailor comes in and gives Horatio a letter. Horatio reads the letter. It's from Hamlet. What does Hamlet tell him in the letter? Are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern coming back? No, he switched the letters. There was a storm. There was a naval battle. They were boarded. Hamlet switched the letters. Okay. Put the seal. What's the seal? The seal of the King of Denmark. He has his father's ring. Claudius has another one. So that he can seal the letters, drop hot wax, put the mark of the seal, King of England. We'll read that. And what do the letters say? Kill the bearers of the letters. Okay. Scene 7. So why is Hamlet telling Horatio that? Everything's building to a head. Scene 7. Okay. We're not going to talk about it in depth, other than what do Laertes and the king come up with? What's their plan? Laertes can't just go and kill Hamlet. He can't find Hamlet in the streets, run him through. Why not? What did Ophelia, when she was in her right mind, say about Hamlet? Most observed of all observers, not meaning the most spied on by all spies, but the one person everybody looked up to. So even though the people are calling out Laertes, we want Laertes, it's kind of like for the moment they forgot about Hamlet. But they've also been told what about Hamlet? He's a little screwy upstairs. Okay? And he's not there. Everybody knows he's gone off to England. So they come up with a plot. What's the plot? It's pretty much Act 5.
Fencing.
A fencing match. Is a fencing match a sword fighting match? No. Because a fence, a foil in fencing, it's made out of a long, kind of square-shaped piece of steel. Wider at the end, pointed at the end, okay? But it doesn't have a sharp edge anywhere along its length. It's just got a point. And in a fencing match, when you fence, you've got a tip, a rubber tip, or plastic tip, wooden tip probably in this day, on the end. And when you touch your opponent, that's a point. You can't slap them. That's not a point. You have to touch them with the tip. Modern day fencing matches, they've got electronic sensors so that if somebody gets a touch, it beeps. This time period, you had judges, referees essentially. Okay? So they're going to do that. But what's Laertes say he'll do?
Sharpen it and poison it.
Yeah. He's going to have the rubber or wooden tip off so the foil will be unbaited, as it's called. It'll have its sharp point. And he's going to dip it in poison that he just happened to bring back from an apothecary in Paris. He just thought it might be useful. Okay? So that's going to be the first way they're going to kill Hamlet. What's the second way they're going to attempt to?
Poison wine.
Poison wine. Okay, so the king is going to poison Hamlet's wife, so when they take a break, he's going to, here, Hamlet, have a sip. And Hamlet's going to drink. So he's going to get stuck with the poison foil, which we're told will kill him within 30 minutes, and he's going to drink from the poison cup. In other words, Hamlet's going down. Okay? So, very end of Act 4. The king says, line 146, it's page 1682, let's further think of this way, what convenient both of time and means may fit us to the shape, etc., etc. And the queen comes in and says to Laertes, your sister's drowned. How'd she die? She drowned. That's it. If you just put that one word on the quiz, she drowned. That's all you needed. Where? And she tells us how. Okay? There's a willow that grows askant that is over a brook, and according to the queen, there she kind of climbed out on a branch over the brook and tried to reach some flowers and fell in. Her clothes spread wide and mermaid-like while they bore her up, which time she chanted snatches of old. Somebody heard while she's in the river. La, 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 But apparently did nothing to pull her out. Until that her garments weighed her down to the bottom of the brook. Okay? So she died by drowning. Act 5. A churchyard. Enter two clowns. They're not really clowns. Because we think of clowns as guys with the red nose and the funny shoes. And they're gravediggers. Why are they called clowns? Because they're not intellectuals. These are like the people standing, the groundlings, who paid a penny to stand in the yard. Okay? So, the first clown asks, is she to be buried in Christian burial when she willfully seeks her own salvation? Now, what's he getting at? Does she get a Christian burial? That is she going to be buried in the churchyard, hallowed ground, that is sacred ground, and receive a full Christian burial, all the prayers of the church, the anointments, all that kind of stuff, when she sought her own salvation? What's that mean, when she sought her own salvation? It goes back to Hamlet's opening soliloquy. Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, resolve itself into a dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. Seek her own salvation, she committed suicide. How can she get Christian burial? Second clown. I'll tell you. I'll tell thee she is. That is, yes, she is getting Christian burial. Therefore, make her grave straight. Okay? Straight means straight away, immediately. Some interpret from east to west in a direct line, parallel with the church. Or east-west, so that when she's put in the grave, lying down, her head would be facing, if she were to be stood up, her head would be facing east. Churches at this time all faced east. Okay? Jerusalem, the rising sun, the whole 9 yards. So, he says yes. So make her, now come on, let's do it quickly. The crowner is set on her, finds a Christian burial. Crowner, coroner. In England, when somebody dies, you have to have a coroner's inquest. If there's any question as to how the person died. I mean, if the person's been fighting cancer for, 20 years and dies, you're going to assume it's cancer. But if you find a dead body on the street, you have to have a coroner's inquest to determine how did the person die. Was it murder? Was it a heart attack? Was it, etc. The coroner said Christian burial. That is accidental death. Clown. How? Unless she drowned herself in her own defense. That is, notice he's bringing up the doctrine or the idea here of self-defense. She drowned herself in self-defense. Self-defense against what? Not sure. But Hamlet's going to pick up that idea later on. Because he's going to enter self-defense. He's going to enter a defense against, in his conversation with Laertes, that I didn't kill Polonius. It was my madness that killed Polonius. Okay? So, they keep going back and forth. And the second clown says, line 20, will you have the truth on it? That is, you want to know the real reason why she gets Christian burial? If this had not been a gentlewoman, she would have been buried out of Christian burial. You want to talk two justice systems? Have that. Why is she getting Christian burial? Because she's the daughter to the advisor of the king. If she had been some nameless beggar, where would she be buried? In some unknown grave, outside church grounds, is his point. All right? So they keep talking, and Hamlet and Horatio come in. Okay? And Hamlet listens to the first clown talking and then singing while he digs. And Hamlet says, has this fellow, line 57 or so, has this fellow no feeling of his business that sings at grave making? Horatio, custom hath made it in him a property of easiness. Well, what did Hamlet say about custom to his mother? If you behave virtuously, it might be hard the first night, it'll be a little less hard the next night. It makes habit easy, okay? Hamlet, yeah, you're right. First clown keeps singing, throws up a skull. Why? Because they're reusing graves. Denmark's a small country, okay? And Hamlet says that skull had a tongue in it and could sing once. How the knave jowls it to the ground. That is, throws it and kind of jowls, sings it to the ground, as if 'twere Cain's jawbone, etc. Okay? Hamlet says, that skull would have been one that circumvented God. Horatio, yeah, you're right. Hamlet, or it could have been a courtier. And what does Hamlet do? He goes through kind of a list of occupations the person might have had. Okay? The clown throws up another skull. Hamlet says that could have been a lawyer. And he goes on and talks about what lawyers do. And it's pretty clear from some of Shakespeare's plays, Shakespeare didn't have a love affair with lawyers. We know he was involved in 2 or 3 lawsuits, okay, where he was the defendant. He was the one accused. All right? So, Hamlet and the first clown talk. They talk about how long it takes a body to rot, all that kind of stuff. And Hamlet asks, who are you digging the grave for? What man dost thou dig it for? Line 110, page 1686. For no man. What woman then? For none neither. Well, who's to be buried in it? One that was a woman. Notice this guy could be a lawyer. Why? Because he narrows down to the smallest meanings of words. It's not a man, it's not a woman. Well, who's going to be buried in it? One that was a woman. Well, why was she a woman, but she isn't a woman now? Because she's dead. He's saying there's nothing womanly about that. What is that? Carrion. It's just a bag of meat. Okay? So, Hamlet asks, how long have you been gravemaker? Line 120. Of all the day in the year, I came to it that day that our last king Hamlet overcame Fortinbras. So Hamlet Sr. when Hamlet Sr. defeated Fortinbras Sr. Okay? Hamlet, how long is that? Well, don't you know? Every fool can tell that. It was the very day Hamlet Jr. was born. So he's been gravedigger since the day Hamlet Jr. was born. You know who I'm talking about? He that is mad and sent into England. Hamlet, yeah, why was he sent in England? Because he's mad. He'll either recover his wits there, or if he doesn't, 'tis no great matter. Why? Because 'twill not be seen in him there. What's his point? Because everybody's crazy in England. Okay? Nice little jibe at his own country people. And they probably, a lot of them laughed at it. There the men are as mad as he. How came he mad? Very strangely to say. How strangely? Faith in with losing his wits. Yeah, that would be how one gets mad, to lose your wits. Upon what ground? That is, Hamlet is saying, why did he lose his wits? Upon what ground means upon what basis? The first clown takes ground with its ultimate base meaning, the ground. That is, he lost his wits here. And then he tells us, I have been sexton here, man and boy, 30 years. He's been digging graves for 30 years. How old is Hamlet? He's 30 years old. How many of you thought Hamlet was 30 years old when you read the play up until this point? No. How old do you think he is? 15, 16, maybe 18? Okay, university student, maybe 20. But 30? That seems rather old. Is Ophelia 30? I don't think so. I think Ophelia's probably late teens. Is Laertes 30? Not clear. What about Horatio, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern? Are all they a little bit younger than Hamlet? It's not clear, but Hamlet's 30 years old, which is one of the reasons why, when we get ready for the fencing match, okay, Gertrude says he's fat. Now, bear in mind, Hamlet has said, in one of his speeches, that he hasn't kept of his exercises. Now, that doesn't mean calisthenics like we think of it. It probably means his daily exercises, the things he would normally do during the day. One of those would probably be, some fencing practice. Okay? But I think another reason why she says he's fat is because he's 30 and Laertes is probably in his early 20s. Okay? So, the clown throws up a skull and says, here's a skull, hath lain you in the earth for 23 years. 23 years. Okay? Whose was it? And the clown says, this was Yorick's skull. Hamlet picks it up. This, even that. Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio. He doesn't say, alas, poor Yorick, I knew him well, which is the famous quote attributed to Hamlet that Hamlet never said. I knew him, Horatio. And he goes on about Yorick. Okay? And then he asks Horatio a question. He holds the skull and says, dost thou think Alexander looked of this fashion in the earth? That is, Alexander the Great, greatest military hero of the ancient world, conquered the known world. Okay? Greece all the way over to India, North Africa, Southern Europe, etc. Yeah, and he smelled that bad too. Hamlet, to what base uses we may return, Horatio? Base means both common, low, and primal. Well, what base uses? Think of his speech to the king in talking about Polonius's body, in talking about the king being service to the table. What base uses? You get put in the ground, your body rots, your body gets eaten by worms, people go fishing with you. Not with you, but using part of you. Okay? Why may not imagination trace the noble dust of Alexander till it find stopping a bunghole? He says, work with me, Horatio. Why can't we trace the great Alexander to this piece of clay plugging up a beer barrel? And Horatio says, 'twere to consider too curiously to consider so. That is, that's to think too, your gloss, curiously, 175, minutely. too particularly. Don't go there, Hamlet. That's what Horatio means. Just don't go there. No good will come from that. Hamlet, no. But to follow him thither with modesty enough and likelihood to lead it, as thus. Alexander died. Alexander was buried. Alexander returneth into dust. From dust thou art, to dust shalt thou return. God tells Adam. The dust is earth, of earth we make loam, that is clay, and of that loam whereto he was converted, turned into, might they not stop a beer barrel? Makes perfectly good logical sense. Imperious Caesar, dead and turned to clay, might stop a hole to keep the wind away. Oh, that earth which kept the world in awe should patch a wall to expel the winter's flaw. That is, the great Caesar used as a piece of mortar in a wall. And then said, well, stop, here comes the king. And he sees a funeral procession. Notice, Hamlet doesn't know whose funeral. The queen, the courtiers. Who is this they follow? That is, the casket is being carried in the front. Everybody follows behind it. The course they follow did with desperate hand, for do it own life. 'Twas of some estate, couch we a while. 'Twas of some estate. That is, Hamlet has said, the queen, the courtiers, who is this they follow, and with such maimed rights. What's he mean by maimed? If something is maimed, what's wrong with it? It's lame. It's got something missing. Part of it's gone. That is, Hamlet, as they're making their way towards him, Hamlet is hearing the prayers. And he's like, that's not right. They just cut off that prayer. Wait, they just omitted them. These are shortened, abbreviated funeral or funereal prayers. And Hamlet interprets that to mean the person they're following, the person in the casket, killed him or herself. But the reason the king and queen are here, it's because the person was of some estate. They are of high birth. Okay? They are of noble stature, if you want. So they hide. And Laertes, what ceremony else? Hamlet, that's Laertes. A very noble youth. Notice what Hamlet says about him. Laertes, when Hamlet says a noble youth, he means he has all the marks of nobility. He also means that's a good guy. That's a good person. What ceremony else? Why does Laertes ask that question twice? What's his point to the priests? More. You're going to give her a better burial service than what you've just done. I want the prayers that say, and forgive her, God, all her sins, whether voluntary, involuntary, word or deed, things she's done, things she hasn't. Okay, I'll say it all. First priest, her obsequies have been as far enlarged as we have warranty. That is, we've done more than we're even allowed to. And we can't do any more. Her death was doubtful, that is. She might have killed herself. And but that great command o'ersways the order, she should in ground unsanctified have lodged. She should have been buried, Here's the churchyard. Here's the church. She should have been buried here. Unhallowed ground. Why? Because the church taught that the soul that inhabited that body is in hell. Souls that inhabit these bodies, or that inhabited these bodies, purgatory or heaven, if one was Catholic. If one was Protestant, heaven. Okay? What's the great command? The king. The king said, no, you got to give him more than that. I'm telling you, kind of saying, I can make another priest Okay? Yet here she is allowed her virgin crantch, her maiden instruments, bringing home a bell and burial. Must there no more? No more. We should profane the service of the dead to sing a requiem and such rest. That's Latin Catholic Mass language. That's not Protestant burial service language. Laertes, lay her in the earth, and from her fair and unpolluted flesh may violets spring. Notice, fair and unpolluted. Now that can have two meanings. One, Laertes is saying, there is no original sin in my sister. My sister was pure as snow. It could also mean fair and unpolluted. She never had sex. Okay? She was virginal. How he would know, I don't want to go there. Okay? Hamlet, what? The Pharophilia? They see flowers being scattered, and Laertes jumps into her grave. Why? He wants to die with her. Father's dead, sister's dead, mother's already dead. She's not in the picture anymore. Laertes has no other reason to live other than to get a vengeance for his father. And Hamlet comes in. What is he whose grief bears such an emphasis, whose phrase of sorrow conjures the wandering stars and makes them stand like wonder-wounded hearers? This is I, Hamlet, the Dane. The Dane? That kind of implies Hamlet, the Denmark. Forget the guy over here behind the curtain who thinks he's king. Laertes, the devil take thy soul. Because Hamlet, when he said, this is I, Hamlet the Dane, jumps into the grave. And Laertes, the devil take thee. Okay? They grapple. And Hamlet says, thou praise not. That's not a nice thing to say. I never said go to hell, Laertes. Why are you telling me to? I prithee, take thy fingers from my throat. As he's being, strangled. Okay? So they're pulled aside. And what are we told by Hamlet? Okay? The king tells, Hamlet says, in response to the queen, oh, my son, what theme? Because Hamlet has just said, 234, I will fight with him upon this theme until my eyelids will no longer wag. Upon this theme, upon this note, upon this idea. She says, what theme, Hamlet? What the hell are you talking about? Hamlet, I loved Ophelia. 40,000 brothers could not, with all their quantity of love, make up my sum. See, that kind of tells us that when he told her, I love thee not, he was lying. And when he told her, get thee to a nunnery, that was his way of also telling her, go to a nunnery. Why? You'll be safe there. Because everybody else in the castle, there's going to be a lot of death. Okay? King, Laertes, he's mad. Don't listen to him. Okay? So, Hamlet challenges Laertes. You want to fight? Let's fight. I can rant, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So Hamlet says to Laertes, what is the reason that you use me thus? Why did you say the devil take my soul? I loved you ever. No, not a homoerotic thing. He just means, I always looked at you fondly. I always looked at you as a friend. But it is no matter, let Hercules himself do what he may. The cat will mew, and the king says, Horatio, wait upon Hamlet. Okay, we'll stop there, because we don't have time to go much more. We'll finish Hamlet, definitely, on Thursday. Quiz over 4 and 5, Acts 4 and 5 of Hamlet on Thursday, and I'll have your other quiz to hand back.